Welcome back to Crimson Archivium, where history remember. When most people think of Roman soldiers, they picture highly disciplined warriors clad in segmented armor, carrying gladii and shields, marching in perfect formation across distant lands. The image of the legionnaire is inseparable from the battlefield, the clanging of swords, the roar of battle, and the strategy of one of the most effective military machines in history. Yet, this image is only half the story. Behind the well-drilled maneuvers and towering fortifications, Roman soldiers led lives that were often quiet, mundane, and profoundly human. Their existence in the legion was not defined solely by war, it was shaped equally by the rhythms, routines, and hidden activities that occurred behind the doors of their camps. A legion was more than a fighting force, it was a mobile city. At full strength, a Roman legion could number up to 5,000 men, all living in tight quarters within the castra, or military camps. These camps were carefully constructed with streets, barracks, workshops, and communal areas, essentially small towns with strict organization. Life in the camp was regimented, designed to maintain discipline, efficiency, and readiness. Each soldier had assigned duties, ranging from guard duty and weapon maintenance to construction of fortifications. But outside these duties, the daily life of a soldier was surprisingly domestic, a mix of labor, leisure, and private affairs. Morning in a legionary camp often began before dawn. Soldiers would wake to the bugle of a cornisan, a horn player signaling the start of the day. Hygiene was a priority. Legionaries used wooden scrapers called strigils to clean their skin, often dipping into communal water basins or nearby streams. Food, though basic, was carefully rationed. Soldiers subsisted largely on grains, legumes, cheese, and salted meat, sometimes supplemented by local fruits or foods acquired during campaigns. Meals were eaten communally in the barracks, where conversations often ranged from news from home to the grumbles and gossip of camp life. These communal moments fostered camaraderie, a sense of shared identity among men who faced danger together. Beyond work and meals, downtime was an essential part of life. Roman soldiers could spend hours in relatively quiet reflection or in small social interactions. They wrote letters to family members, chronicled events, or even practiced skills like writing and reading, especially important for soldiers from rural or less educated backgrounds. These private, almost scholarly moments are often invisible in historical records, overshadowed by tales of conquest and battle, yet they were vital to the morale and mental well-being of legionaries. Personal space in a camp was minimal. Barracks typically housed 8 soldiers per room, each with a small sleeping area and storage for personal belongings. Privacy was scarce, so what happened behind closed doors often involved negotiation of personal boundaries, quiet conversations, and the cultivation of friendships or rivalries. The tight quarters also meant that soldiers learned to adapt socially, developing bonds of loyalty and trust that were crucial in combat. The bonds forged in these mundane settings, over shared meals, shared laughter, or even shared mischief, could mean the difference between life and death on the battlefield. Despite the rigor of daily routine, Roman soldiers also found ways to indulge in small pleasures and personal rituals. Some kept small talismans, amulets, or tokens from home as reminders of loved ones. Others engaged in physical exercises beyond drills, wrestling matches, running, or strength training, both to maintain fitness and to pass the time. These activities provided outlets for stress and were often competitive, reinforcing status within the unit. The soldiers' downtime, though seemingly ordinary, was thus deeply intertwined with the culture of the legion, shaping hierarchies, loyalties, and morale. One of the lesser-known aspects of legionary life was how soldiers interacted with local populations. When stationed in provinces, soldiers often mingled with civilians, trading goods or forming relationships that could range from friendships to romantic liaisons. These interactions were sometimes tolerated, sometimes frowned upon, depending on the strictness of commanding officers and the proximity to campaigns. Nevertheless, they added a layer of complexity to military life, illustrating that Roman soldiers were not merely instruments of imperial expansion, but also human beings negotiating personal desires, social norms, and survival. The psychological dimension of life in the Legion is equally important. Soldiers faced not only the threat of death in battle, but also the monotony and harshness of camp life. Long marches, extreme weather, and the constant presence of authority required discipline but also resilience. Coping mechanisms varied. Some turned to superstition, praying to gods or spirits for protection, while others developed humor and storytelling as a way to endure stress. Humor in particular was a powerful social tool, a way to create solidarity and relieve tension. Stories of heroism, jokes at the expense of officers, and camp gossip all helped soldiers navigate the pressures of their environment. Interestingly, the private lives of soldiers often reflected a blend of Roman culture and the influences of conquered territories. Legionaries stationed in Gaul, Britain, or North Africa were exposed to local customs, foods, and entertainment. Some adopted local practices in their leisure time, whether it was learning foreign games, enjoying local delicacies, or incorporating new styles of dress in off-duty hours. This cultural exchange, largely invisible in official military accounts, enriched the personal lives of soldiers and created a more dynamic picture of Roman military society. Ultimately, life in the Legion was a delicate balance between public duty and private existence. The battlefield demanded discipline, courage, and loyalty, but behind the fortified walls, soldiers were engaged in the quiet work of living, caring for themselves, nurturing friendships, reflecting on their circumstances, and seeking small joys amid the hardships. These private aspects of life, often hidden from historical narratives, reveal that Roman soldiers were not merely the disciplined, almost mythic warriors remembered in history books. They were men negotiating the tensions between duty, desire, and humanity, living fully, albeit constrained, behind closed doors. By examining these moments behind the battlefield, we gain a richer understanding of what it meant to be a Roman soldier. They were both instruments of empire and individuals with personal routines, social networks, and inner lives. This duality, public heroism versus private existence, is at the heart of understanding Roman military culture. The Legion was not just a machine of war, it was a living community, with all the complexities, routines, and hidden dramas that make human life enduringly fascinating. While the image of the Roman soldier is often dominated by scenes of battle formations, sieges, and heroic exploits, a substantial part of a legionary's life unfolded quietly within the boundaries of the camp. Life behind the fortifications was structured, repetitive, and surprisingly domestic, marked by routines, personal habits, and a social ecosystem that allowed soldiers to survive not only physically but psychologically. Understanding these private moments offers a window into the human side of the Roman military, revealing the everyday realities that shaped the men who built and defended an empire. The Roman military camp, or castra, was more than a temporary encampment. It was a small, organized community designed for efficiency and control. It had streets laid out in precise grids, fortified walls, gates, watchtowers, and zones designated for barracks, stables, workshops, and command posts. Each soldier's life revolved around this microcosm. Barracks, typically housing 8 soldiers per room, were modest and utilitarian, wooden or stone structures with straw bedding, limited storage, and sparse personal space. Despite these austere conditions, soldiers found ways to maintain personal order, a reflection of their discipline and need for mental stability. Daily routines began early, often with the sound of horns, signaling wake-up calls before dawn. Hygiene was a serious concern in the camps, particularly because disease could spread rapidly in close quarters. Soldiers used strigils, curved metal or wooden scrapers, to remove dirt and sweat, often following a brief soak in communal water supplies or nearby streams. Personal grooming extended beyond hygiene. Well-maintained hair, nails, and armor were a mark of pride and status. Soldiers also had to ensure that their weapons, shields, and armor were in top condition. Regular cleaning, polishing, and repair were not merely functional but a reflection of the soldier's discipline and commitment to the Legion's standards. Meals were another central aspect of camp life, combining sustenance with social interaction. The standard diet of a legionary was simple but nutritious: grains like wheat or barley, legumes such as lentils and beans, salted meat or fish, cheese, and occasionally fresh vegetables or fruit acquired locally. Bread was often baked in communal ovens, and porridge served as a staple. Eating was generally communal, conducted in small groups within the barracks. This daily ritual was more than a necessity. It was a time for camaraderie, conversation, and the exchange of news. Letters from home, rumors of upcoming campaigns, and shared grievances about officers or harsh conditions would often circulate during these moments, fostering bonds among the soldiers. Beyond meals and work, personal habits played a crucial role in maintaining mental health and morale. Soldiers engaged in small personal routines, such as reading, writing, or carving inscriptions into wood or stone, activities that connected them to their identities outside the Legion. Writing letters to family members was particularly important, providing emotional solace and a sense of connection to the world beyond the camp. Some soldiers also kept small charms, amulets, or religious tokens, invoking protection from gods or spirits. These items were deeply personal, often reflecting an individual's beliefs, superstitions, or attachment to home. Exercise and physical training were also integral to camp life. Soldiers practiced marching drills, weapon techniques, and combat exercises, which kept them battle-ready, but they also engaged in informal activities during free time. Wrestling matches, running competitions, and strength exercises were common, often serving both recreational and competitive purposes. These activities not only maintained physical fitness but also reinforced social hierarchies and relationships within the unit. Friendly contests allowed soldiers to assert dominance, earn respect, or simply bond through shared physical exertion. Social interactions within the camp were complex and multifaceted. Soldiers developed close-knit friendships, formed rivalries, and navigated hierarchies that were sometimes as socially intricate as they were militarily strict. Barracks life demanded cooperation, as shared responsibilities like cleaning, cooking, and guard duty required coordination and mutual respect. At the same time, privacy was scarce, so soldiers had to manage personal boundaries carefully. Trust and loyalty were critical. A soldier who undermined others risked both social isolation and potential repercussions in the chain of command. Within this tightly knit environment, interpersonal skills were as important as physical prowess. Romantic and sexual relationships were also part of camp life, though they were often discreet. Roman military codes generally prohibited fraternization with certain individuals, but relationships, whether fleeting or long-term, were not uncommon. Soldiers formed bonds with camp followers, local women, or even fellow soldiers. These relationships provided emotional support and companionship, and in some cases were strategic, offering connections or advantages within or beyond the camp. While the historical record is sparse, archaeological and literary evidence hints at a rich, sometimes hidden, sexual culture within Roman camps. Religion and superstition were inseparable from daily habits. Soldiers often prayed, made offerings, or consulted omens to ensure protection in battle and general well-being. Altars and shrines were common in the camps, and each soldier had personal devotions or ritual practices. Divination, the reading of signs, and consulting the auspices of birds or natural phenomena were taken seriously. These practices provided a sense of control in a life dominated by the unpredictable nature of warfare. The private aspect of these rituals, personal prayers, secret offerings, and silent invocations, underscored the deeply personal dimension of spiritual life among soldiers. Leisure activities in the camp were diverse, ranging from gambling and dice games to storytelling and music. Soldiers often brought small portable instruments or sang while performing chores. Stories of heroic deeds, legends, or humorous anecdotes circulated widely, reinforcing cultural identity and providing relief from the monotony of camp life. Such leisure was not trivial. It was essential for maintaining morale and mental resilience, particularly during long campaigns when soldiers were far from home, facing extreme conditions and constantly under the threat of danger. Finally, the intersection of personal habits with local culture added another layer to camp life. Soldiers stationed in distant provinces encountered new foods, clothing, games, and customs, and many adopted or adapted these elements into their routines. Some brought back souvenirs, local delicacies, or even new religious practices, enriching the culture of the legion. These adaptations were subtle yet significant, illustrating that life in the camp was not merely an isolated military experience, but a dynamic environment influenced by broader social and cultural exchanges. In summary, personal habits and camp life were central to the daily existence of Roman soldiers. Their routines combined discipline, hygiene, physical fitness, social interactions, spiritual practices, and personal indulgences. Behind the seemingly rigid structure of the legion, soldiers maintained identities, forged relationships, and sought solace in small routines. These practices not only ensured their survival, but also sustained the mental, emotional, and social fabric of military life. By studying these private aspects, historians can move beyond the image of the soldier as merely a combatant and appreciate him as a human being navigating the intricate balance between duty, camaraderie, and personal needs. Life in the camp was, therefore, a complex mixture of order and spontaneity, public duty and private rituals, discipline and indulgence. Understanding these personal habits provides a richer, more nuanced picture of Roman soldiers, men who were not only warriors but also human beings, with routines, relationships, and personal worlds that thrived behind the walls of the castra. When one imagines Roman soldiers, the mind immediately conjures images of rigid discipline, organized formations, and relentless campaigns across Europe, Africa, and the Near East. Yet, beneath the armor, behind the fortifications of their camps, soldiers were as human as anyone else, seeking moments of amusement and respite from the hardships of military life. Leisure, games, and entertainment were essential to their daily existence, serving as a release valve for stress, a means of social cohesion, and even a way to assert status within the legion. Understanding these activities reveals a Roman soldier not only as a warrior, but as a man with hobbies, rivalries, and desires for fun and relaxation. The Roman military recognized that the psychological welfare of its soldiers was as crucial as their physical readiness. Long campaigns, harsh climates, and the ever-present threat of battle created a need for structured downtime. Leisure was not merely indulgence, it was functional. Soldiers engaged in activities that both entertained and kept them physically and mentally sharp. Among the most common forms of recreation were games, many of which required skill, strategy, and a competitive spirit. Dice games, for example, were enormously popular. Soldiers used small bone or wooden dice, often betting small amounts of money or personal items. These games provided excitement, a temporary distraction from routine, and a socially acceptable outlet for competition. The chance element of dice also allowed soldiers to experience risk in a controlled environment, paralleling the uncertainty of battle in miniature. Board games and strategy games were equally significant. The game of latrunculi, sometimes likened to modern chess or checkers, was a favorite among Roman soldiers. Played on a grid with small pieces representing soldiers or officers, it allowed participants to exercise tactical thinking, foresight, and planning, skills directly transferable to actual military operations. Such games were not only entertainment but also a mental gym, honing strategic abilities while fostering camaraderie. Friendly rivalries often emerged around these games, and victories could enhance one's reputation among peers, subtly influencing social hierarchies within the camp. Physical recreation was another cornerstone of leisure. Soldiers routinely engaged in wrestling, mock combat, running competitions, and other exercises beyond formal drills. These activities were partly for fitness, ensuring that men remained agile and strong, but they also served social and emotional purposes. Wrestling and fighting contests provided an outlet for aggression and frustration, while competitions reinforced bonds among comrades. Participation could elevate a soldier's status within the unit, particularly if victories demonstrated skill, strength, or courage. Importantly, these contests were often accompanied by cheering, betting, and laughter, making them communal events that strengthened social cohesion. Music and performance also played a role in camp entertainment. Soldiers often sang, accompanied themselves on small instruments, or recited poetry. Songs could commemorate past battles, honor heroes, or simply entertain during long evenings. Music, especially, served as a unifying force, helping to coordinate activities like marching while also offering emotional relief. Performances, often improvised, allowed soldiers to showcase talents, tell stories, and inject humor into daily life. Such artistic outlets were surprisingly common, illustrating that even in a militarized environment, the human need for expression persisted. Storytelling and humor were particularly vital. After grueling days of labor or training, soldiers gathered to share tales, some of heroic feats, others of misadventures or exaggerated gossip. Storytelling was both entertainment and education, passing down knowledge, strategies, and moral lessons through narrative. Humor, especially, played a crucial role in maintaining morale. Jokes about officers, absurdities of camp regulations, or the misfortune of others allowed soldiers to cope with stress and foster camaraderie. Laughter was a form of resistance against the monotony and hardship of camp life, a subtle rebellion against the rigid hierarchy that governed their lives. Alcohol and communal drinking were closely tied to leisure and entertainment. Wine, often diluted with water, was a standard provision in the Legion. Occasional communal drinking sessions allowed soldiers to relax, socialize, and celebrate victories or personal milestones. These gatherings were occasions for storytelling, joking, and bonding, creating a sense of community that extended beyond the battlefield. While excessive drinking was discouraged by commanding officers, moderation was tolerated as a necessary aspect of morale and social cohesion. Romantic and sexual relationships also intersected with leisure in ways that reveal the human side of soldiers' private lives. In many camps, soldiers formed relationships with local women, camp followers or fellow soldiers. These interactions offered emotional relief, companionship, and sometimes practical advantages, such as acquiring local knowledge or goods. These relationships were often discreet, conducted during off hours or in private quarters, but they were an integral part of life behind the camp's walls. Love, lust, and companionship served as essential counterpoints to the harsh realities of military life, reminding soldiers of life beyond war. Religious practices, while often solemn, could also involve communal entertainment. Festivals, sacrifices, or ritual observances were sometimes accompanied by music, dancing, and feasting. Soldiers participated in these events with a mix of devotion and social enjoyment. Even in moments of piety, entertainment and leisure were embedded, reflecting the Roman tendency to combine the sacred and the social. Such events strengthened group identity, reinforced loyalty to the Legion, and provided opportunities for celebration and amusement. The proximity to local populations further enriched leisure options. Soldiers stationed in distant provinces had access to regional customs, games, and festivities, which they sometimes adopted into their own practices. Gladiatorial shows, local theater, and athletic contests offered both spectacle and entertainment. Soldiers could observe, participate, or even bet on outcomes, integrating local culture into their daily lives. This exposure created a dynamic blend of Roman military and provincial entertainment, expanding the range of leisure activities beyond the camp itself. It is essential to recognize that leisure and entertainment were not trivial distractions. They were vital for the survival of both body and spirit. Roman military life was harsh, demanding, and often monotonous. Without moments of amusement, mental fatigue and social stress could compromise discipline, morale, and even combat effectiveness. Games, music, storytelling, and social gatherings provided a structured outlet for these pressures, allowing soldiers to recover, strengthen social bonds, and maintain psychological resilience. Leisure was thus both functional and profoundly human. In conclusion, the leisure activities of Roman soldiers reveal a dimension of military life rarely highlighted in popular imagination. Beyond the rigid discipline and battlefield heroics, soldiers were individuals who sought amusement, intellectual stimulation, social connection, and emotional relief. Games, physical contests, music, storytelling, drinking, romantic relationships, and religious festivities all contributed to a rich tapestry of daily life behind the camp walls. These pursuits allowed soldiers to assert individuality, form social networks, relieve stress, and navigate the challenges of a highly regimented environment. By examining these moments of recreation, historians and enthusiasts gain insight into the human complexity of Roman soldiers, men who were not only instruments of empire but also seekers of joy, camaraderie, and personal fulfillment amidst the rigors of military service. Leisure, far from being a minor footnote, was an essential lifeline, a private world that sustained soldiers in ways as important as their training and combat prowess. It reminds us that the Roman legion was not just a war machine, but a community of human beings with desires, habits, and the enduring need for entertainment and connection. While Roman soldiers are often remembered for their visible hierarchy, rigorous discipline, and relentless campaigns, much of life within the legion also involved hidden networks, informal alliances, and secretive social structures. Beyond the watchful eyes of centurions and commanders, soldiers formed clandestine groups, ritualistic brotherhoods, and tightly knit alliances that played a crucial role in morale, loyalty, and survival. These networks were more than mere social clubs. They represented the private human dimension of military life that allowed soldiers to navigate the challenges of discipline, danger, and isolation. Roman military discipline was famously strict, with severe penalties for insubordination, desertion, or failure to follow orders. Yet, human beings naturally seek companionship, trust, and shared identity, especially in high-stress environments. Within the barracks and during long campaigns, soldiers often created informal groups or societies that functioned almost like secret fraternities. These groups could be based on shared background, regional origin, prior service together, or mutual interest in certain rituals or practices. While evidence is limited, inscriptions, graffiti, and literary accounts suggest that such brotherhoods were widespread and influential in shaping soldiers' daily experiences. One of the primary purposes of these secret societies was mutual support. Life in the legion was harsh, extreme weather. Grueling marches, dangerous skirmishes, and separation from family created constant stress. Brotherhoods provided emotional and practical support, offering help with personal tasks, sharing information, and providing protection in disputes. Members often pledged loyalty to one another through oaths or rituals, creating bonds that could rival or even surpass the official loyalty demanded by Roman military law. This kind of support system was essential for both survival and morale, ensuring that soldiers could rely on trusted companions in moments of crisis. Rituals and ceremonies were central to these brotherhoods. While public military ceremonies celebrated victories, promotions, and honors, secret rituals often occurred behind closed doors, symbolizing unity and shared identity. These rituals could involve symbolic gestures, oaths of loyalty, shared meals, or initiation practices that distinguished members from non-members. In some cases, these ceremonies borrowed from broader Roman religious traditions, invoking deities for protection, luck, or strength. The secrecy and exclusivity of these rites enhanced the psychological bond between members, creating a sense of belonging that was vital in an environment defined by danger and hierarchy. In addition to emotional and ritualistic functions, secret societies often had strategic and practical purposes. They could facilitate the distribution of resources such as food, clothing, or money, particularly in times of scarcity. Groups may have acted as informal intelligence networks, sharing information about officers, enemy movements, or camp politics. In a highly regulated military environment, where official communication channels were limited and tightly controlled, these networks allowed soldiers to exert a measure of agency over their lives, subtly resisting the rigid structures imposed by command. Brotherhoods provided a layer of autonomy, a hidden infrastructure within the formal military machine. Social cohesion within these groups was reinforced by shared experiences and personal trust. Soldiers who had served together for years often relied on one another for survival during both battle and camp life. This reliance fostered a sense of fraternity that transcended official ranks and regulations. In many cases, loyalty to the Brotherhood could conflict with official duties, creating ethical dilemmas and tensions within the Legion. Some historians suggest that these secret networks may have influenced decisions during mutinies or rebellions, highlighting their potential power and the dual-edged nature of informal loyalty. Interestingly, these brotherhoods were not always male-exclusive. While the Legion was primarily composed of men, soldiers often interacted with camp followers, local populations, and family members. Some secret networks may have included non-combatants in peripheral roles, such as providing intelligence, resources, or social support. The fluid boundaries of these groups allowed them to adapt to circumstances, blending secrecy, social cohesion, and practical function in ways that were both flexible and resilient. The existence of secret societies also underscores the human need for identity and recognition beyond official structures. In a world dominated by the rigid hierarchy of the Legion, soldiers could assert individuality and cultivate status within these private networks. A respected member of a brotherhood might wield informal influence, enjoy social prestige, or gain practical advantages that were unavailable through formal rank alone. This dual system of authority, official versus informal, created a layered social reality within the camp where both compliance and cunning were necessary to thrive. These clandestine networks also had psychological significance. Facing constant danger, uncertainty, and monotony, soldiers relied on trust and loyalty within the Brotherhood to maintain mental resilience. Knowing that one had allies who shared burdens, secrets, and risks alleviated the anxiety inherent in military life. Rituals and ceremonies provided a sense of control and continuity in an unpredictable world, reinforcing emotional stability and social identity. In essence, secret societies were as much about mental survival as social or practical benefit. Historical evidence, though limited, provides glimpses into the diversity and scope of these networks. Graffiti discovered in Roman camps often references group names, inside jokes, or symbols that suggest organized affiliations. Literary sources occasionally hint at oaths, secret gatherings, or exclusive clubs among soldiers, implying that such practices were culturally embedded within the military. Even the Roman historian Tacitus hints at private alliances and loyalties that coexisted with the formal structures of the army, revealing that these clandestine networks were both acknowledged and feared by some commanders. Finally, the legacy of these brotherhoods extends beyond the Roman army. They reflect the enduring human impulse to create communities within larger, more impersonal systems, especially under conditions of stress or danger. Secret societies provided soldiers with a sense of identity, agency, and mutual care, demonstrating that even the most disciplined and regimented individuals seek private spaces for trust, connection, and belonging. They remind us that behind the grandeur of empire and the spectacle of war, the daily lives of soldiers were shaped not only by orders and strategy, but also by the subtle, often invisible bonds that made life livable. In conclusion, secret societies and brotherhoods reveal a hidden dimension of Roman military life. They were networks of loyalty, support, and identity, providing emotional, social, and practical benefits in an environment defined by danger and hierarchy. Through rituals, oaths, and shared experiences, soldiers created private worlds of trust and solidarity that complemented the formal structure of the Legion. These networks illustrate the human ingenuity and resilience of Roman soldiers, highlighting their capacity to navigate the tension between obedience and autonomy, visibility and secrecy, duty and personal connection. By studying these clandestine communities, we gain a deeper understanding of the lived experiences of soldiers, men who were not only warriors but also humans seeking companionship, identity, and a sense of control behind the closed doors of the camp. Roman soldiers were admired for their discipline, loyalty, and battlefield prowess, Yet behind the disciplined exterior of the Legion lay a world full of secrets, indulgences, and human frailties. Life in the camp was not always heroic or orderly. It was also shaped by scandal, vice, and behaviors that the official histories often ignored or suppressed. These hidden aspects of military life offer a glimpse into the private, sometimes darker, realities of men who were otherwise celebrated as paragons of Roman martial virtue. The harsh conditions of military life, long marches, grueling labor, exposure to violence, and separation from family created a fertile ground for indulgence. Soldiers, faced with monotony and constant stress, sought relief in activities that ranged from harmless entertainment to morally ambiguous or illicit behaviors. Alcohol, for instance, was a common part of camp life. Wine, often diluted with water, was supplied as part of rations, but soldiers frequently consumed it in excess during leisure hours. Drinking sessions were not just for intoxication, they were social events, occasions for storytelling, games, and bonding. However, overindulgence often led to fights, disorder, or even punishable offenses, creating tensions between the need for morale and the demands of discipline. Gambling was another pervasive vice. Dice games, which were widespread for both leisure and social interaction, frequently involved wagers. Soldiers might bet money, personal possessions, or even food, turning seemingly innocent pastimes into potential sources of conflict. Gambling provided excitement and a sense of risk, echoing the unpredictability of battle in a controlled environment. However, it also introduced opportunities for dishonesty, cheating, and disputes, sometimes escalating into violence within the camp. Despite the risks, the thrill of gambling was irresistible for many soldiers, reflecting a human desire for stimulation amid repetitive routines. Sexual relationships and clandestine affairs were also integral to soldiers' private lives, often existing in defiance of official regulations. While the Roman army generally discouraged fraternization with camp followers or local women, such relationships were common. Camp followers, including women and sometimes children, accompanied the army to provide food, laundry, and other services. Soldiers formed bonds with these women, ranging from casual encounters to long-term attachments, which offered companionship, emotional support, and intimacy. Additionally, relationships between soldiers themselves were known to exist, sometimes hidden from authorities. These interactions revealed the deeply human need for connection, desire, and companionship in an environment that was otherwise austere and often isolating. The moral landscape of the camp was further complicated by acts of theft, bribery, and petty corruption. Soldiers occasionally stole supplies, sold rations, or engaged in illicit trade with locals. While these actions were officially punishable, they were often overlooked in practice, particularly when minor infractions helped maintain morale or practical survival. Scandals could erupt when theft, betrayal, or deception was discovered, creating rifts within the barracks or between units. Such events demonstrate that Roman soldiers, like any human community, navigated a complex social environment where ethics were negotiated and sometimes compromised. Violence and personal disputes also contributed to the hidden life of the camp. While discipline enforced order on a large scale, minor quarrels, rivalries, and duels were frequent. Soldiers might settle disagreements through physical confrontations, often with minimal oversight. These acts were not merely spontaneous, they were entwined with questions of honor, reputation, and status within the unit. A soldier who demonstrated physical prowess or courage in such encounters could gain informal prestige, even if the action technically violated military regulations. Conversely, involvement in scandalous or violent incidents could damage a soldier's reputation and career, highlighting the delicate balance between private behavior and public perception. Religious and superstitious practices sometimes intersected with vice. Soldiers relied heavily on omens, charms, and ritual acts to ensure protection and success, but these practices could be misused or exaggerated. Some soldiers engaged in superstitious behaviors purely for personal gain, such as invoking deities before gambling or secret rituals to manipulate outcomes. Others participated in rites that were socially or morally controversial, blending personal belief, psychological comfort, and opportunism. These practices highlight the ambiguous line between devotion and indulgence, reflecting the complex interplay of faith, fear, and human desire. Prostitution was another discreet yet pervasive aspect of life behind the camp walls. Archaeological evidence and literary sources indicate that soldiers often engaged with prostitutes, either accompanying the army or found in nearby settlements. These relationships provided sexual relief, companionship, and sometimes practical advantages, but they also carried risks, disease, theft, or social scandal. The clandestine nature of these encounters emphasizes the duality of soldiers' lives: visible discipline in public, private indulgence in hidden quarters. Scandals were not limited to individual behavior; they could involve broader group dynamics. For example, gambling rings, secret alliances, or illicit trade networks could implicate multiple soldiers, creating complex webs of loyalty, deceit, and complicity. Commanders were aware of such networks but often tolerated them, recognizing that strict enforcement could damage morale or provoke rebellion. In some instances, rumors of immoral or scandalous behavior spread through a camp, shaping perceptions of leadership, loyalty, and reputation. These episodes illustrate that Roman military life was governed not only by formal rules, but also by informal social codes and hidden dynamics. Psychologically, indulgence in vice and scandal served important functions. Soldiers endured extreme stress, fear, and monotony, and private indulgences offered relief. Whether through gambling, drinking, sexual activity, or secret alliances, these behaviors allowed soldiers to reclaim a sense of control, agency, and personal identity. In a highly regulated and dangerous environment, hidden pleasures became coping mechanisms, helping men navigate the challenges of military life. They remind us that soldiers were not stoic automatons; they were human beings negotiating fear, desire, and survival behind the imposing discipline of the legion. Finally, the hidden lives of Roman soldiers reveal the tension between public image and private reality. Official accounts, inscriptions, and military records often present soldiers as disciplined, heroic, and morally upright. Yet archaeology, literature, and careful historical analysis show that this image was only part of the truth. Behind closed doors, soldiers engaged in behavior that ranged from playful indulgence to morally ambiguous or outright scandalous acts. These hidden aspects of life provide a richer, more nuanced understanding of Roman military culture, illustrating the complexity of human behavior under extreme circumstances. In conclusion, scandals, vices, and hidden lives were integral to the experience of Roman soldiers. Alcohol, gambling, sexual relationships, theft, violence, superstition, and clandestine alliances all played a role in maintaining morale, social cohesion, and personal survival. These private behaviors reflect the realities of life in a demanding, hierarchical, and dangerous environment, reminding us that soldiers were not merely instruments of empire, but human beings with desires, fears, and flaws. By studying these hidden aspects, historians gain a more complete picture of the legion, not just as a military machine, but as a human community navigating the challenges of survival, identity, and morality behind the closed doors of the camp. Ultimately, the stories of scandals and vice humanize the Roman soldier, revealing that behind every armor-clad figure marched a man with private joys, temptations, and moral struggles, an enduring testament to the complexity of life within one of history's most legendary military forces.